Okay, so now that we are done with our 1980s side for the most part, aside from our lips, we are going to work on our 90s eye makeup. So eye makeup in the 90s, it kind of varies again, just kind of like we were talking about with stuff in the 80s. So in the 90s, you had some people that had basically no eye makeup on, or they had like very, very like nude natural colors or kind of like plummy colors. So all the focus was really like more like on their lips and their brows. Or you had some people that would wear like blue or green or like kind of like a frosted purple. I think it's kind of fun to play with like the more, again, like if you can wear a lot of color and do stuff with color, I always think that's more fun. And a lot of times too on stage you end up having to wear a little bit more just so that you can kind of like actually be able to see it. So I'm gonna go with one. I believe it is a photo of like Reese Witherspoon that I saw where she kind of had on sort of like this like frosty purple eyeshadow, but then still had that very like dramatic like dark brownish red like 90s lip, and like the really thin brows. So I thought that was kind of fun. So that is gonna be what we're gonna go with on this side. So I'm gonna go ahead and use just like a regular powder eyeshadow on this side, but I did put down an eyeshadow primer first. So again, I think that that is really important, just so that your eyeshadow has something to stick to have some kind of a base. So whether that's like a concealer, foundation, concealer like pencil, whatever. I think it's just good that you have something for it to stick down to. So I'm just gonna take this purpley color and I'm just gonna put it just on my eyelid. I'm not gonna pull it too far up like I did with the pink, because in the 90s, like I said, even if they are using a more intense color like this, and I would kind of call this more of like an intense color, not necessarily as intense as this side, but it's still kind of intense. They didn't always wear like a ton of it, and it was still a little bit more subtle. I mean, you'll definitely see some people that had eyeshadow all the way up to here that was like blue or frosted. But for the particular look that I'm going for, which is like sort of somewhere I feel like between like the pop star stuff and like the grungy look, we're just gonna keep this color just on the eyelid. And I might end up wanting it to be like a little bit lighter, so I might take something like iridescent over it. But for now, we're just gonna do this. And again, if you kind of just move your brush back and forth, that's just gonna naturally help you kind of blend that out. And then I'm gonna take a lighter color and put that right underneath my eyebrow. So remember, the brows are like a really big focus for the 1990s. So I'm gonna make sure that I find the right brush that I want as I keep disappearing. I'm going to make sure that I still leave enough space for it to be like a very pronounced thin line, but I still want this to be kind of blended out. So I'm going to use just like a normal matte shadow first, and then we're going to go back in with like frosted, because definitely I feel like towards like the end of the 90s is when you really started to see that very like frosted, all frosted everything makeup look become very, very trendy. And so we're just going to take this, and again, if you just kind of like move it back and forth like this, that's going to help it blend out. And again, we want to keep our inner corner really bright, so I'm going to do that. And then they didn't really do necessarily for like a lot of these looks like a lot underneath the eye, so I'm going to keep it more intense on this side. I'm still going to keep it kind of clean, even though I am wearing like lilac eyeshadow. And then just to like intensify that a little bit, I'm like, oh, if I want this to be more like iridescent or frosted, I have like a frosted like purpley blue color that I'm gonna really lightly put over the top of it. And so something like this, like it's gonna give you like a little bit of shimmer, but it's not gonna make it like crazy glittery. So they did use a lot of like glitter and shimmer in the 90s, so if there was ever a time to use it, this would definitely be it. But I don't want this to be anything crazy, so I'm just gonna like really lightly put over it. And a lot of times too, if you just focus that like right in the center of your eye, that's gonna be like most flattering and kind of like eye opening. So again, this isn't something that's gonna do like a ton, but it's gonna help kind of lighten it and brighten it just a little bit and get it more to that sort of like more pastel-y kind of purple that I would have liked for this one to have. But remember, we work in theater. We don't always have everything that we need, so you just kind of have to figure out what you need to use of what you have to get the look that you're going for. So something like that definitely did go back in. That helped lighten it, and that helps draw like a little bit more attention to the center of my eye. And then I'm just going to take this like larger brush and kind of blend it back out. And then I'm going to take just like a slightly darker color in my crease to darken that. Is that necessarily something that's super period appropriate? No, but I do want to make sure that, again, since I'm going on stage, I have a little bit of definition. So because I put that shimmery color, there's a little bit of like a natural definition there. But I'm just going to add something with just like a hint of like a really light brown, just to make sure that that stays defined, especially when you have a lot of other stuff that might be going on. The lip's going to be really dark, so I don't want to totally like lose my eye in all of this. I'm just going to take like a very light brown and very lightly. So it's still like, it's a darker brown than like what my eyeshadow color is, but it's not like a chocolate brown or anything like that. So it needs to be darker than like what your lid color is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like the darkest color in the world, especially for something like this where I don't really want the color to show up. I just want like the shadow of it. So doing something like that will give you like a hint of definition without it being crazy. And like obviously you can see like the main look for this is still the purple. This is just gonna help it sort of like pop a little bit better on stage. If this was just for like a photo or something, I wouldn't be as worried about it. But since it is something that we are like technically doing for stage, I want to make sure that I am always keeping that in mind. So that way, I'm training you guys the right way, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And then again, we can kind of just pat that back over it. And then we'll blend it, because I really don't want it to like be like, they kind of had like a sort of a smoky eye going on in the 90s, but it wasn't anything too intensely smoky. It's just enough to give us definition. And then if you ever have spots like this where you feel like, oh, like that kind of like bluish purplish color or whatever color went a little bit too low, I usually just take whatever like my highlight color was and I just blend that away. So we can go back in and we'll take like that lightest kind of like blending color, and I can go like right under that, and I can even put a little under here, and that just kind of helps blur and blend everything together. Because remember, in the 90s they were really into their skin looking really perfect and nice, so that's all we're trying to do here too. And so to kind of like continue the more frosted look, now that we kind of have the eye where we want it to be, I'm going to take like a really like, not like chalky white, but almost like a chalkier white, and kind of like lay that on top of the highlight I already had, just to kind of give it some of that like 1990s frosted moment going on here. And so I'm still going to blend it together. I don't want to lose any of the definition, but something like that I think definitely helps make it a little bit more period. I still can't believe that we're like talking about the 90s being period, but we are at that point in time now where the 90s are now considered a period. It is a decade that is long gone, right? And here we are trying to recreate it. Again, you just kind of go back and forth and blend everything. And then I'm like, oh, if I feel like I kind of lost some of my purple, I can just like go back in with this shimmery shade and kind of lay it on top of everything. So something like that, that's going to be pretty 90s. I almost feel like, unless you're going like more like the club kid, like rave scene sort of eye makeup, that is almost like as intense as some of it gets. Like sometimes you do see like some like of the smoky eyes and stuff, but really it is just more of like kind of like a sweep of color a lot of the times, and a lot of attention. I really feel like more attention was really spent on lips and eyebrows than like actual like eyeshadow application and stuff. But just my observations, not necessarily true. So as far as like eyeliner goes, I feel like a lot of times in these looks you didn't necessarily see it. For some of like the grungier ones, there might be kind of like a smoked out sort of one. Since we're doing stuff for stage and I don't want to lose my eyes, I am going to do like a really thin line of black, but I don't want it to necessarily be anything that's going to like take away from this. So it's going to be like a super thin line, really nothing intense, because I don't want to take away from like the like shimmery purple, because that really should be like the focus of it. But I do want to make sure that I have like some kind of definition. So we're just going to put like a little bit of eyeliner on, and then we will talk about 1990s eyebrows.